Hey guys, hope everyone's well. I just out on the lanes on a Royal Enfield Himalayan. It's my 2019 bike. I bought it to do a Bulgaria trip and I've owned it since. And it was the centerpiece of what I was calling Project Himalayan, which I did a first video about maybe a year ago, but just been so busy doing stuff, I've not had time to do it. And now with a bit of downtime, I thought I'd do an update video. So we've got basically stock Himalayan. I'm going to change handlebars. I've got some Cooperb aftermarket handlebars to put on there that just brace to give it a bit more strength. I've got the AD Moto sump guard on here, which is a stainless steel item. I've just had a look, you can get them on eBay for 90 quid. I found that's pretty much the sturdiest aftermarket sump guard you could get. And the two main changes I was going to do to this bike was suspension and the cam upgrade. In terms of suspension, over the summer, me and my mechanic Pete, we fitted the Cooperb lift kit, which is 500 quid. It's a Hagen rear shock and it's cap inserts in the front forks to lift it. All round, it's supposed to lift the bike by about an inch front and rear. I think the main benefit in that is it gives you a little bit more clearance to the peg. One of the problems with the Himalayan, and I guess it's taking it beyond its remit, is that when you're riding it in ruts, which you do on UK trails, you can tend to find that the pegs grind out, and then if the pegs are grinding out, then your boots are clattering on the side of the ruts, which is never ideal, and there's always a risk of injury in that. So the idea with a lift kit is it gives you an extra inch of clearance, which just gives you a bit more elevation above the ruts and should hopefully allow you to ride through it. The uprated rear shock also gives you more adjustability, rebound and damping settings and preload, so you can find a lot more adjustment in that Hagen rear shock. And the idea of an uprated rear shock is just give you better performance really. And it's awkward with the Himalayan because I always think the suspension on the Himalayan is really good. I think the way it rides, the crispness, the smoothness, the way it can deal with bumps and lumps and turns and twists at the same time, both on-road and off-road, is sort of exemplary and almost class leading in this area of bikes. Honda's CRF 300, you automatically, almost instantly have to upgrade the suspension on that bike because it's so soft. The 310 GS is not the most sophisticated, and that could do with improvement. Only the KTM 390 Adventure has really got good stock suspension. So for me, uprating the Himalayan suspension, you've got to ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve by doing that? Am I a hefty person who likes to carry a lot of luggage, therefore needs more preload to stiffen up the rear to stop it sagging? Or do I like to do a lot of more extensive trail riding and need a bit more clearance for ruts and things like that? If you're neither of those two categories, you might be better just leaving the stock suspension as it is, just playing around with that preload adjuster. But yeah, so we have fitted this Hagen rear shock and these internal caps. There's a link to the video in the description which shows me and Pete fitting it and faffing around. It's kind of it's a DIY job to fit a rear shock, but only if you've got a bit of nous and a few tools to do it. It's not as straightforward as two bolts, a bolt at the top and a bolt at the bottom. There's a lot of paneling underneath that has to come off. Probably took us a couple of hours. And then also, obviously, with suspension, you've got to set it up. With all that adjustment comes fine tuning. And unless you know what you're doing with suspension, it's easy to adjust it in the wrong direction and make it worse than it actually was as standard. So, yes, buy uprated suspension, but acknowledge that you could do with taking it to somebody to tune it to your weight and to your riding style. So don't assume that by bolting on better suspension, you're going to get better ride quality, because that's not always the case. With this, we've stiffened the rear. We've not done anything with the front, so what I really need to do is either get some new fork internals, which aren't overly expensive, I think 90 quid for some YSS, and also try some 15 weight fork oil rather than the stock 10, just to stiffen that front, because at the minute it's stiff at the back, a little bit soft at the front. So this is the fine tuning you do when you start to go down these avenues of modification, which, you know, again, the beauty of the Himalayan is it's a great bike standard. Now you've got to ask yourself, do you want to go down that avenue of fine tuning and refinement and fiddling and faffing, or do you just want a bike to ride? If you just want a bike to ride, leave it standard. It's a great bike as standard. In terms of the cam, now people have asked me this all year, whenever you fit, have you fitted the cam, what do you think, where's the video, etc. And I'll be honest, I've not fitted it, which hints at laziness, or the fact that, you know what, when I step back and acknowledge what the Himalayan is, same with the suspension, it's a good bike, the engine is fine, it's not got a lot of power, it's never going to give a lot of power no matter what you do to it. Therefore, you know, are you chasing shadows by trying to improve the performance? I've ridden two bikes this year with the cam fitted and other bits, Lextex end cans and things like that. And I've got to be honest, yes, riding Richard Rowe's tarted up, tricked up Himalayan in the Scottish Highlands, there is definitely more briskness mid to top range, top revs. So from sort of 4,000 RPM, it goes, it accelerates, it feels like there's some guts there, chases through to the red line. It makes that 2-car overtake easier, it makes the surge out of corners stronger, and it feels a brisker bike. Now, the downside with that, I felt when riding that bike, yes, there's a briskness that makes you want to chase it, but do you lose a little bit of that lovely soft torque, that nice climbing torque, that trail torque, that softness on the throttle, that nice meaty mid-range that you get with a stock bike? And I do think you lose a little bit of that in chasing the top end. Now, if I was commuting every day and wanted pace to pull onto a dual carriageway or accelerate around cars or lorries, the cam probably is a good thing. But for back road riding, B-road riding, trail riding, I am not convinced any of those improvements make it a better bike for those duties. And therefore, if that's all you're doing, leave it as standard. Because riding those two bikes, Mike Belcher's and Richard Rowe's, I like what it had done, but did it make it a better bike? And I'm not convinced it did. So I have the cam to fit. I am going to fit it because it's very easy to jump on somebody else's bike and I suppose objectively say, yeah, it's better or worse. But when you do it to your own bike, sometimes you're going to spend more time on it, get used to it more and learn its benefits. And I suppose when you go down that avenue of fitting it to your own bike, you also have to learn to love it as well. So I am going to get that cam fitted. I'm going to get it done over the winter and we're going to see how we go. But in terms of Project Himalayan, you know, you've got two options with Project Himalayan. You go down one avenue and you never stop, because there's always things to bolt on to add. Or you go down the second avenue, which is just leave it there, leave it alone. I'm pursuing avenue 1 for a short while, but we'll see how it goes. I think for me, the most important things with modifying Himalayan on a budget to make it a better bike, better bars, because they bend so easily. So get some, 30 quid from Cooperb in Northampton. Braced, better, stronger. Handguards, there's lots of cheap ones online. Bark Busters, obviously the go-to ones, but they're 130 quid, which is a lot of money. And so once you've done that, tyres. The stock Seat tyres are fine. I'm going to do some videos on tyres and Himalayan and terrain. They're fine. You're going to get some squirm, but they're all right. What combination I've got on this is a Heidenau K60 rear and a Continental TKC 80 front. So I've got a knobbly on the front and a semi-knobbly on the rear. For me, the Himalayan always gets good natural traction on trails, so I don't think you need an aggressive rear knobbly, which is going to wear faster. The K60s wear very slowly. But on the front, you're going to want some grip. So a knobbly such as a TKC 80 or a Mitas E09 is going to suit it great. Downside of a Heidenau or a Mitas, very difficult to swap. So if you get a puncture on either of these tyres, big effort to get that tyre on and off. Continentals, easier. With life, compromise. So that's it, Project Himalayan update 2. I'm going to go for a ride now and take you up a trail which is quite tricky, which should show whether whether the suspension has benefited or not. And then in another video I'll do the cam. All right, cheers, bye. Okay, so we're just going to put this suspension to the test on a lane. I know it's quite a rooted climb, rocky climb. The standard bike will go up it, no problems really. I just want to see what the additions of an inch of travel makes really. First gear, keep it in first down. Look up through the trail. We've got some logs to clip here. Yeah. Nice, some big rocks. I don't know what you can see because it's getting dusk, not a great time to ride. And I'll tell you what, yes, it is easier. Yes, okay. This suspension is an improvement on the stock bike that I brought up here 3 days ago. It's just climbing better, riding the rocks better. Your feet are clear, more clear. This is a tricky technical lane.
First gear climbing, easy to get wrong. What I would say, this hide now definitely gets less rear traction than the Continental TKC80, which is expected. And I've got to be honest, I would prefer to be on the Continental right now rather than on this hider now. So maybe that's a lesson to the wise. You can compromise and have a tyre that lasts longer, but ultimately it's going to give you less traction on a trail like that. And if it's traction you're after, then yeah, compromise ain't going to serve you that well. So that's the lane I've used. Some people will recognise that from other videos. Hope you can see that. Hope that's worked right. Using the 360 camera, but trying to flatten it out because not everyone likes the fish lens. So that lane, okay, so a standard, what would you call, green lane, which is quite wide, like a farm access road, that sort of thing. I don't think you're going to notice any improvements from the suspension because you're not dealing with rocks and things like that, or sticky climbs. I think in that kind of conditions, when you're doing trail riding, true trail riding, tricky trail riding, or more challenging trail riding, then I think the benefits shine through of having that extra ground clearance and also having that better performance of the rear shock, which seems more respondent, more grippy, gives a bit more traction. Suspension is a great dark art of understanding, and you know what, I don't understand suspension as well as I could do. There's people out there who do. What I would say is, from a rider's perspective, it makes that climb easier. So you can talk about the technical aspect, but what you're really wanting, does it make it better, easier? Yes, it does. So I would say for that sort of trail riding, if you're going out trail riding on your Himalayan, you've got mates on CRF 250s, 300s, those sort of bikes, you're going to be able to do a little bit more than this. Is it worth spending 500 quid on a lift kit to get that little bit more? Well, that depends on what you want to do with the bike, how keen you are to extend the range of it or the ability of it, and whether you've got 500 quid sat there waiting to burn on suspension. You know, and that's the question. I'll just tell you this section down here. There's always a question comes up at Himalayan Odyssey. How do you ride ruts? I've got to be honest, I haven't a clue. This is what I hate this type of riding. These are narrow ruts, narrow shallow ruts. Because all you have to do is find the edge of the rut, which is very easy on a narrow gauge rut like this, and it'll flip the bike sideways or upside down, like there. Oh, it's always wanting to slide. So you've got to be really precise, well balanced, or sit down. You know, and that's the thing. How do you ride ruts? Whatever's most comfortable or feels safest to you. And if that's sat down with your feet out, so be it. There's no shame in sitting down and paddling, because you've got a long way to fall when you stood up. That's the only downside to standing. On the previous video where I was out on the green Himalayan, a good comment came in saying I wasn't slipping the clutch, which is very true. On those climbs and on that last climb, I don't slip the clutch on the Himalayan, simply because I find it chugs really well, and it struggles to store. See, I'm struggling there. The tyres are clogged with mud, it's very narrow, and the trail's wanting to send me everywhere. I'm countering the bike, dabbing. Very tricky riding, and I'm not just making excuses. So on those climbs, I find the Himalayan, you can come up with a constant smooth throttle and almost feel the slip through the throttle and adjust that throttle input accordingly. I think on a KTM 390 or a 310, which are Revier engines, shorter stroke, you are going to have to work the clutch, and you do, having ridden up those bikes, you do have to slip the clutch. Whereas on the Himalayan, you can get away with it. Alternatively, on this kind of terrain where you really do want to control your speed, harness your power and have soft input, I am slipping my clutch. I've never got that clutch fully out, I'm always feathering it. So I think that what suggests is there's never any hard fast rule to trail riding, because it depends on what bike you're on, what terrain you're on, what tyres you're on, what ability you're at, and then everyone's a little bit different anyway. So is there a universal rule to trail riding? No. Is adapt and overcome with a basic toolkit and applying it as you see fit? Yes, I think that's the only way you can do it. Learn some basic skills, just spend some time on the bike. I'm quite tired now. Quite a climb. So that's it. Project Himalayan 2 suspension, I would say that's a success. We're going to play around with that front fork oil weight just to see if we get a bit of stiffness in it. Although, to be honest, it's perfectly fine as it is. I'd probably keep riding it, just leave it alone. Rather than faffing about, taking it apart and draining oil out and putting more in. But I like what the lift kit has done. And equally, it doesn't seem to have impacted it on the road. Do you need it done to your bike? Depends what kind of riding you're doing, really. But if you're not doing anything gnarly, I wouldn't bother. That's it, go now home before it gets dark. Take it easy, guys, have a good one. Bye.